As you may have already heard, Deadline has reported that the Star Wars series The Acolyte will not be renewed for a second season. And that news may have come as a surprise to some people, especially to anyone who was actually enjoying the show, but given how vocal non-fans of the series have been, I think the cancellation was only an inevitability. I mean, I happen to be a huge Star Wars fan who actually likes Kathleen Kennedy, Leslie Headland, Amandla Stenberg, and everyone else who was involved with the creation of this show, and even I had a negative opinion on the series. I even took the time to binge watch the entire show over again, since all of the episodes had been released, because I was hoping to have a better understanding of the narrative now that I could see the bigger picture. At the very least, I was hoping to see how the Acolyte would connect to the rest of the saga, but even after watching the show twice now, I have to admit that I'm still not much of a fan of it. Everything just feels so forced. The writing, the story, the characters, the character development, everything. It's like the showrunners knew where they wanted this story to end, and they worked their way backwards from there. But by doing so, nothing about this series flows in any natural or organic way. Take the finale, for example. The episode begins with Sol taking Mai back to Brendok, but after being confronted by Chimere and Osha, and finally admitting that he killed Mother Anastasia, Osha ends up killing Sol out of her anger. And I just don't believe that the events would have taken place like that. Osha loves Sol. She looks up to him like a father figure, and while she may be upset about the fact that he killed her actual mother, I would think her decision to kill Sol wouldn't be so rash. I mean, think about it. Osha's inability to process how Sol could kill someone she loves in a moment of weakness led her to kill someone else that she loves in a moment of weakness. So I don't know what this story is trying to say. Should Sol not have acted on his instincts? Should he not have followed through with what he believed was the right thing to do? Sure, he should have told more people the truth a lot sooner, but holding on to a lie doesn't inherently make him a bad person, right? A flawed one, sure, but not a bad one. And what about Osha? She is the main character of the show, right? I should want to root for her to grow as a character, but she falls to the dark side, and the show wants to present this revelation as a good thing? Why the fuck would I root for Osha to have the hots for Chimere? He actively killed her fucking friends. You know, not in a moment of weakness where he thought he was doing the right thing. He is a bad fucking guy. He's being trained by the same person who will go on to train Space Hitler, but the show wants me to ship this pairing? Fucking why? Why would Osha decide to leave Mai after being separated for so long? Why would Chimere risk having his identity being revealed by leaving Mai behind in the first place? If he could wipe her memory, couldn't the most powerful Force users in the galaxy figure out a way to unwipe it? I don't know, but it seems like the show wanted to end on a profoundly Shakespearean note, so it included hints of romance and tragedy. But everything leading up to these moments felt so overly contrived. Everyone in this story made decisions that were totally out of character just for the sake of the plot, and that made for a story that felt frustratingly convoluted. Keep in mind that I've only talked about some of the character choices that occurred in the season finale. I don't even want to talk about some of the baffling decisions that were made in all of the previous episodes. So, what was it all for? What was the Acolyte ultimately about? Well, I think it was about how the flawed mistakes of a few people could have larger consequences for many others, which does sound like an interesting theme that is worth exploring in a Star Wars story. Unfortunately, I think the Acolyte really failed in the execution of that story, because the message of said story definitely feels like it got lost and muddled somewhere along the way. I don't think that means Disney should have canceled the series though, because even in spite of all of my complaining, I still wanted to see where this story could go. Yes, the writing, the acting, and the overall production could have been better, but these are all technical aspects that could have been improved upon in Season 2. Now, I don't know if we'll ever find out more about the origins of Mayor Osha's creation, or see if Ernestra will ever face any consequences for covering up her actions right under the nose of the Jedi Council, or if literally any other questions from the series will ever be answered in general. I mean, maybe Lucasfilm will choose to pick up some of these plot points in the future, but I assume they would be explored in completely different projects. That way, Disney can distance itself from the Acolyte title in the future. But I really hope Disney doesn't choose to abandon the High Republic era completely, because the timeline can still produce plenty of new stories and new characters that fans can enjoy. The potential is still there. It's just a shame that the Acolyte didn't live up to its own full potential. It had a great cast, a good amount of money dumped into the production, and an intriguing story to begin with, but for one reason or another, these individual elements just didn't come together to form one cohesive whole. Or at least, that's my opinion on the matter, because it should be stated that the Acolyte definitely has a fair amount of fans. And while I'm happy for the people who were able to enjoy this series, I have to imagine they were pretty frustrated by the news of the cancellation. I mean, if I spent a good amount of time defending the good qualities of a show that I liked, I would be pissed off after hearing about a cancellation too. I don't want to get invested in a show for no reason, or have people bully me online telling me that my opinion is wrong, just for them to celebrate and rejoice at the news of the show's cancellation. That sucks. Just because I didn't enjoy The Acolyte doesn't mean I want to take away the enjoyment from the people who did. So I hope my criticism on the show has come across as being more constructive than whining, because I don't want to add to the hate or the vitriol that already exists online. But if I were to state my honest opinion about the series, I would have to admit that I was extremely underwhelmed by The Acolyte. And while I think the overall quality could have been improved upon with a second season, it's unfortunate to know that we're probably never going to get one. And that does make me feel bad for the people who did enjoy the show, and for the people who also worked on it. So hopefully we'll get to see the actors, characters, and plot points return in one form or another, because I think the fans definitely deserve to see some sort of follow-through. Because even if I didn't care much for the series as a whole, that doesn't mean I can't find good things to appreciate about it. Just because I was underwhelmed by the first season doesn't mean that I'm happy about Disney canceling the series. That's such a weird thing to celebrate, in my opinion. I mean, imagine if George Lucas himself decided to put Star Wars to sleep after The Phantom Menace or even Attack of the Clones. After all, they were the worst received Star Wars movies at the time, but if he did that, we never would have gotten Revenge of the Sith, or The Force Awakens, or Rogue One, or The Mandalorian, or Andor, or even The Clone Wars. And to be fair, I absolutely hated The Clone Wars when it first came out. I thought the movie was so bad that I didn't even bother to watch the show for years. And guess what? The show did eventually get better with time. But now the Acolyte will never have that same luxury. Look, I'm a Star Wars fan. I love all kinds of Star Wars content, but not every piece of content is going to be for me, and that is perfectly okay. There's no need to spread hate towards Kathleen Kennedy or Leslie Headland or Amandla Stenberg or anyone else who was ever involved with the project that I just didn't like, because these are all incredibly talented people and they will go on to work on other incredible projects in the future, and I want to see what those projects will end up being. That doesn't make me any less of a Star Wars fan than you are, just because you disagree with me. So, just because the Acolyte may not get a recommendation from me, that doesn't mean I'm any less of a Star Wars fan now than I was before the Acolyte started. I still love this franchise, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future has in store for it. And I hope that's the last thing I'll ever have to say about the Acolyte, because the discourse surrounding this show has been absolutely exhausting. But I appreciate anyone who's taken the time to hear my full thoughts on this series, so as always, thanks for watching.